You said that Hammond was influenced by your experience in the Army. How has the Army influenced you?
Well, I'm one of those people that I wouldn't have the life I had today if I hadn't been in the service. I wound up going in the service. I never believed that the Vietnam War was justified. You know, it was a lie. It was built on a lie. I think the Iraq problem is the same thing. But the military doesn't start wars. Politicians do, either to line their pockets or because they're stupid or because they've obligated themselves to somebody who has said, I need a war, go fight one. And so they are in control of the military, and they put out propaganda and say, we're threatened unless we do something. And then a war starts. The people that have to fight it very often know that they're going into harm's way, not for a valid reason, but they've got to do it. And it's been that way throughout history. You know, into the Valley of Death rode the 500. They knew they were riding into the Valley of Death. Today's no different. I get very angry. I hear people abuse the American military. Sure, there have been some incidents of some mistreatment of prisoners, but how can today's public be so short-sighted not to remember the atrocities that these people were committing? How can the public forget the Japanese treatment of prisoners in World War II? What the hell right does Japan have to complain about a couple of bombs when they were the instigators of the Bataan death marches? Men, women, and children. And the Germans? You know, they may make a good Volkswagen, but how can you ever forget what happened in World War II? And Bosnia and Serbia? You know, we live, one of the problems with mankind is that we are an animal that distrusts animals not like our pack. And there is always going to be someone with their own agenda that's going to cause our pack to try to kill the other pack. That's the nature of the beast. But within each pack, there are good people who take up the sword to defend their kind. Boy, that's going to get me in a lot of trouble.
The show has taken on a drastic transformation since the beginning of season 9. Have you watched any of these episodes since? Have you caught any of them?
I honestly don't watch a lot of TV.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I would have the same answer for about any show. I watch golf matches and the World Poker Tour because I'm not good at sitting still looking at a screen. I watch old movies, you know, like I don't know what was on last night, but I watched a poker game and then I watched The Ex-Mrs. Baxter, which is an old film from the 1940s that happened to star William Powell, who was in the Thin Man series, and because it was set in the 30s, it had all the sets were Art Deco, and so I watched it. You know, I'm sure there was some brilliant currently made drama that would have been much better for my soul, but I laughed. And that's what life should be.
Right, right. Okay, then in terms of the show's transformation from what you've been told by the producers when you come in, do you think this is a healthy direction that the show has taken in order for it to survive, or do you think it's long past its time? SG-1, not Atlantis.
I don't think it'll ever be past its time. The Bible for Stargate is based on the whole lexicon of human mythology. That's the spine. So the next conflict fought by the next edition of the 4 people that went through the gate is still going to be valid as long as they stick to that. Once the show starts being all about, if it ever does, mechanics and special effects, then it'll be past its time. You've got a bunch of really outstanding creative minds that work on the show. I don't think they'll ever let it go there.
Good.
And the fans I talk to feel the same.
Good. Right. It's funny how life changes our plans, like you've said. I remember watching on one of the Stargate DVDs an interview where you said you would play Hammond as long as RDA was involved with the series. When was it that caused you to make the decision that it was time to move on anyway?
My health problems, which I haven't hidden those, One of the reasons I'm so loyal to Stargate is they were so loyal to me. In 2002, I had, just at the start of the season, a major operation. I had an abdominal aortic aneurysm, and they had to remove a large part of my aorta. Most shows would have cut me off. Stargate stood by me. I never missed a single paycheck. They scheduled the episodes around me, and when they brought me back, they made sure that there was nothing that I was asked to do that might put me in harm's way. So, but there comes a time where you really can't. If you're in my condition, I'm a heart patient, I'm a diabetic, I've got other minor problems, and it's really time to slow down.
Yeah.
I joke, but I really am. My doctor, one of my doctors said I've got more scar tissue than anybody he's ever worked on. Because I've done stunts. I was in the military. I was an athlete when I was a young kid, and then I'm just stupid and clumsy. And now I've got arthritis along with other things. I take a lot of pills every day. So I'm very aware of my mortality, and especially after season 7, and especially with the loss of one of the family.
Terrible.
Yeah. It just wasn't the same for me.
Was Heroes hard to do?
Yeah.
All the fandom was affected when
I think it was a good episode, the 2-parter. But we changed. We went from Showtime to the Sci-Fi channel, and they wanted to see a major thing, and that's an arbitrary decision made by some stupid bean counter. But of course, Stargate had, no option to refuse that, so somebody had to go. I don't like change. I'm old. There's enough change. Every day They invent a cell phone that I have no idea how to use, or a computer that I buy and a week later it's obsolete, you know, and it's worth pennies on the dollar for what I spent for it. The world, when I was a young guy, a computer had to be housed in a building.
Yeah.
You know, and the whole world's changed.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Ruby Fleming, your wife.
Has restored my life.
Yes. Tell us about Ruby. How did you meet her?
Years ago, I write as well as do the rest of the thing, and years ago some friends of mine asked me to write a script for them that would be set here. And I wrote a detective story called Blues in the Rain. But again, I'm a very stubborn guy. You got to remember, I'm a redneck hillbilly from the Missouri-Arkansas border next to Oklahoma. And it ain't sunburned. It's, you know, I wrote it for my friends. So I wrote a codicil into the thing that to be produced, it had to star my friends. Ruby and a woman that she was partnering with, producing at the time, optioned the script, thinking, well, nobody's dumb enough that they won't let you cast a name in the lead rather than his friend. Well, I'm that dumb. So they had several nibbles on having the money to produce it, but you know, they had to use somebody else, and we remained friends. And as my first marriage fell apart, and only after I had left my first wife did she ever tell me. In fact, I had no idea that she thought that I was anything but dumb and ugly. But she took me in, and she is the most nurturing person I've ever known. And I love her more than anybody I've ever loved in my life.
You tell us you tell a story at conventions every once in a while. I think you were over at Terrell's house, and you were I think you two were dating. Could you please tell us that one again?
Well, we went out. Terrell's mate is a great guy named Cal Crusty. Calvin is an RCMP officer. At that time, he was the head of the homicide division in Burnaby. And there were a bunch of house invasions that had occurred, more in one small span of time than had ever occurred before. And Ruby and I had arranged for our first date.
Oh, okay, so this was way back.
Yes, and it was going to be on, I think, a Wednesday night or something. And Calvin had been just killing himself at work, and Terrell and him decided they needed to get out, and they were used to calling me, and I was always the fifth wheel. Well, this time I had a date. And Calvin said, well, we want to come with you. And I said, okay. And we went to a wonderful local steakhouse. And the two women, by the way, at the time smoked. And anyway, we got seated. We met at the steakhouse. We arrived in different cars. And we got there, and Calvin and I started talking, as two guys will. And the poor women kind of got ignored. And we had our salads, and we had some wine, and he and I got to talking about crime and injustice and all this crap. In general terms, of course, because he couldn't tell me about ongoing investigations.
Yeah.
Never would do that. But as a result, we kind of neglected the two women, and so between the main course, or one of the courses and the main course, they decided to go outside and smoke. And Terrell asked Ruby, how long had we been dating? And Ruby said, well, it's our first date. We'd known each other for 10 years. And Terrell said, well, he's a good guy. And Ruby said, yeah, I really like him. And Terrell said, well, I don't think he knows that.
Yeah.
And Ruby said, well, I've given him plenty of indications, and Terrell said, he's not very bright. You're going to have to hit him over the head. And so we went back, they came back in, and Calvin and I finally realized that we had irritated them or something. So we tried to pay more attention. And we finished the meal, and Calvin decided that we should come over to their place for a nightcap. So we went over to their place, and immediately upon arriving, Terrell and I disagree about this. She says Calvin went to the bathroom, but no, she went to the bathroom. And Calvin got a call from work. And he had already poured these humongous tumblers full of scotch to the brim. And they both left the room. And I told Ruby, I said, honey, I got to get some ice and water in this thing or I'll be a dead man. And she agreed. So we went in. Now, when we left the restaurant, she, as I opened the car door for her, which gentlemen from the South always do for their women, she turned around and kissed me. And
over the head, Don.
but it wasn't a, it was just a, but it was on the lips. And I thought that was kind of funny, but I didn't want to insult her, so I just gave her a peck back. But anyway, I thought, And then I said, we had to have some ice, and she followed me in the kitchen, and when I handed her glass, she kissed me again. Well, that's like putting fresh meat in front of an old dog. I set my glass down, and I had her on the floor. And Calvin walked in. And he grabbed Terrell and brought her in. Of course, Calvin and Terrell wanted to complete visiting with us, but I now had gone in heat, and so I guess as we stayed in the living room talking, they weren't about to leave us alone again. I started coming out with some strange lines. They weren't lines. Everything was from the heart. But Calvin, at one point, started laughing at what I was saying so hard that he fell off his chair. And they never let me forget that. But it's been good ever since.
Good. Glad you're happy.
I am.
In the years ahead, as Stargate continues to grow and transform, what would you like fans to remember about your involvement, your footprints, if you will, in this franchise?
Just that he was a good man who took care of his people. That it was a true portrayal.